Throughout the years, there have been so many bad characters in the Smash series, but have you ever thought, who is the worst Smash character ever? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna answer that very question. I'll give a thorough analysis on the worst character in Smash Bros history and what makes them so bad. Before we jump into the video, if you're new here, I'm Pink Eye Samurai and I give my dumb opinions on all things Nintendo, so if that's something that interests you, then consider checking out my other content. Without further ado, I now introduce you to the worst Smash Bros character ever. Ganondorf sucks ass. I mean, why would anyone want to play as him? He's so slow and clunky. Yeah, he's powerful and can kill with a couple of touches, but he's just so damn slow. Why is he walking like this? Ganondorf made his debut in Super Smash Bros. Melee. In Melee's debug mode, Ganondorf's name appears last, which means obviously he barely made the roster, and I mean, honestly, you can tell. His animations seem super lazy and are recycled. His moves are almost the same as Captain Falcon's, making him basically a clone, and I don't know about you guys, but I think it's ridiculous that the Demon King has the same moveset as a fucking racer. What sense does that make? I understand the game was only developed in 13 months, but come on, Nintendo. You could have cut corners somewhere else. It is widely believed that Ganon is just the worst version of Captain Falcon. The only thing that stops Ganondorf from being the worst character in the game is the fact that he plays almost identical to Falcon, who's a top tier. But I mean, Ganondorf does have his differences from Captain Falcon, like frame data and character attributes, and even some of his moves are a tad bit different. Ganondorf essentially is a slower but more powerful Captain Falcon. Now, Captain Falcon's playstyle in every Smash Bros game is a combo-heavy, explosive character, whereas Ganon is just a, oh yeah, I'm gonna hit you hard a couple times and now you're gonna get sent to the fucking Shadow Realm kind of character, you know? But because his playstyle relies so heavily on getting stray hits, it sometimes can be unreliable. The main difference between Ganondorf and Captain Falcon is that Ganondorf trades speed for power. For example, Ganon's down air in Melee does 22% to Falcon's 16%. So for all my mathematicians out there, that's a whopping 6% stronger. Okay, comparing him to one of Melee's best characters isn't a fair indicator to see if someone is bad or not. So how does he stack up against other characters? Well, not very good, but surprisingly, Ganondorf is regarded as being the high mid-tier in Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is his highest placing in any of the Smash games. Over the years, he's fluctuated between 8th and 12th for the first 11 tier lists. His strong power and punishing game was super broken in the early metagame of Melee, but after a while, players became better equipped to defend against Ganon, and players started to abuse his flaws, making him extremely hard to solo main. While his brutally strong attacks are nice on paper and in some scenarios, in all practicality, they were hard to win with because of his physics and animations. Smash Melee is a very fast-paced game, and to play with such a slow character like Ganondorf is kind of setting yourself back. You're probably saying to yourself, well,
how come Hungrybox makes Jigglypuff look broken when Jigglypuff has one of the slowest dash speeds in the game?
Well, Jigglypuff may be super slow on the ground, but Jigglypuff's air mobility is the best in the game, hands down. And that matters a lot when you're talking about a platform fighter. Ganondorf's air mobility is the third worst in the game, only beating out Luigi and Ice Climbers. His dash speed is barely any better, being the fourth worst in the game. So if you main Ganon like I did for many years, you're probably much at a disadvantage because there are so many characters that have the option of playing more defensively against you. And all because Ganondorf struggles against top tiers doesn't mean he struggles against all the other characters in this cast. So obviously Ganondorf is worse than the top tiers, but even the characters he is better than are only by a small margin. His weaknesses outshine his strengths and make it so hard for most players to use him competitively, besides a few players. It's not always about how high a character can jump or how fast they can run, it's also about how fast their moves come out, how safe are they on shields, and how big are the hitboxes. Ganon's down air is one of the best in the game. It's the best meteor smash in the game after all, and his frame 6 up air is perfect for players who try to cross you up and is a good combo tool. And don't get me started on his forward air, which has a surprising amount of range and honestly feels like an aerial smash attack, but that's about as good as it gets. This is where things start to suck, and while his up B is a decent command grab, it sucks as a recovery tool. Edgeguarding Ganondorf is as easy as downloading today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. One thing that really hinders Ganondorf in Melee is his out of shield options. His best option is his jab coming out at frame 3, which isn't bad for a heavy, but considering it only faces one direction, which is obviously in front of you, you can't hit anything that's behind you quickly. Obviously they couldn't give Ganondorf frame 1 options like Shine or Game & Watch's up special because that would be so fucking broken, but give him something, Nintendo. When I saw the trailer for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, I was hyped as hell. I mean, I'd never think in a million years I would see Mario in a pair of bootcut Levi's. boss. No, seriously, why did Nintendo make all the characters look ultra realistic? And because every character got some sort of remodel, Ganondorf's remodel not only made him look like a fucking doofus, it actually hindered him dramatically. His body frame got even bigger, making him even more susceptible to combos. You see, in Melee, he was playable, but it was when Brawl released when we saw the true decline of Ganondorf. In Brawl, he's widely considered the worst character in the game. I don't usually fully wholeheartedly agree with tier lists, but you literally can't argue and tell me Ganondorf isn't the worst character in the game. He keeps relatively the same power he had in Melee, but his frame data and speed got even worse. His jab is no longer a decent out of shield option, coming out at frame 8, which is 5 frames slower than his Melee version. As a matter of fact, pretty much every move in his kit is a few frames slower than his previous version, including one of his best burst options in his side B. In Brawl, it got nerfed by being 1 frame slower and 3 frames slower while in the air. His fair got nerfed in the game too, making his sour spot even bigger than it was before. His down B has always been kind of a mediocre move, but the one use it had was restoring Ganondorf's double jump. Well, guess what? That's no longer in the game. And I mean, they did add a tiny hitbox at the end of Ganon's recovery, but I mean, it's laughable how small it is. In short, his recovery still sucks. So while he may be able to survive a lot of powerful attacks, it doesn't even matter because he can get edge guarded by a fucking toddler. But hey, his side special now can carry enemies off the stage, so that's cool, I guess. To top everything off, L canceling no longer exists in Brawl, so his aerials are now nowhere near as safe as they once were, which is just the icing on the cake. His lack of speed, his huge frame, and his bad frame data aren't anything new to the Smash series up until this point, but they're just amplified in this game. Brawl is a much slower paced game, making him even a worse character. Ganondorf's mobility is the worst in Brawl, and when you pair this up with the fact that Ganondorf has no real way of dealing with projectiles, is awful. I mean, Samus mains must drool out the mouth when they face him in bracket. I mean, probably every player would love to face this fat sack of shit in bracket. And I mean, I could go in for hours on how atrocious this character is, but moving on. Smash Bros. 4 revitalized Ganondorf's spot in the Smash series. He's no longer the worst character. Bye bye F tier, see ya Jigglypuff. Oh wait, what's that? Oh, Ganondorf still fucking sucks ass? Oh yeah, he's the second worst character in Smash 4. It's improvement, I guess. I mean, at this rate, he'll be the third worst in the next game, right? Smash 4 definitely buffed him, but I feel like it wasn't the right kind of buffs to make him a better character overall. Yes, Ganondorf is a strong character, but does he really need to be any stronger? His killing power in Smash 4 was a little bit overkill. With the introduction of Rage, Ganon, along with many other characters, were able to net kills fairly quickly as long as you were at a high enough percentage. It wasn't his killing power, but rather his poor mobility and frame data that held him back once again. Silly Sakurai. Starting off, I will say his moves were significantly buffed, making them do slightly more damage, and his frame data was dramatically better than the previous game. His nair and dash attack became a lot faster. The buff to his dash attack was huge for him because now he had a decent burst option other than his side special. Flame Choke now had more range and does more damage than the previous version. And yes, his nair and up air are good for edge guarding, but how often do you see Ganon go off stage? When I mained him, I was absolutely terrified to go off stage because of the risk of reversal. So some of his best tools in his kit couldn't even be used properly. Ganondorf was still extremely slow, and it felt like he was almost always in disadvantage state. I know I already talked about him being zoned out by projectiles, but I mean, it was ridiculous in Smash 4. Don't believe me? Why don't you try to play For Glory as Ganon going against the Samus on laggy internet connection? Now, that's the matchup chart I die to see. With the release of Smash Bros. Ultimate, I feel like Ganondorf was kind of abandoned. And I mean, I get it. Everyone is here, right? Who cares about old-ass Ganondorf? Well, I do. I feel like there was no hype coming into Smash Ultimate for Ganondorf mains because he's been so shitty for so long. But in the trailer, he had a sword, and I mean, kudos to you, Sakurai, for finally listening to your fans. Ganon mains have only been asking you guys to give Ganondorf a sword for just about 20 years. During the early meta days of Smash Ultimate is probably when Ganon was at his highest, at least in my opinion. A lot of meta-defining characters in the early game like Pichu could easily die off of one interaction just because he was so light. I mean, it wasn't a winning matchup by any means for Ganondorf, but you know what I mean. And as the metagame started to develop, Ganon started slipping through the tiers and is now considered the worst character in the game. This now means he's been arguably the worst character for 3 games in a row. This is where things get interesting. His moves got a huge buff in this game. All of his smash attacks are now sword moves, which gave Ganondorf the much needed range for his kit. And I guess Nintendo thought it would be so funny if they made Ganondorf's up tilt faster. Oh wow, instead of coming out at frame 70, it now comes out at frame 60. No, in all seriousness, he now has a faster jump squat and less landing lag, allowing him to hit sick combos. But while he did get big disjoints with his smash attacks, they are significantly more laggy than his previous smash attacks. And now with his side special, you can't cheese the opponent anymore. you know what I'm talking about. In Ultimate, he remains one of the slowest characters in the air, which completely negates the power of his aerials. His jump height is basically the same, so it's awful to put it nicely. And his dash speed is still one of the worst in the game, so he's still gonna inevitably struggle with projectiles and rushdown characters. I'm sure you guys are already aware of this, but in the Smash series and, well, fighting games in general, there are unofficial classes or archetypes. These archetypes usually give an overall summary of how a character is supposed to be played based off their moveset, game mechanics, and stats. And there are some characters that have multiple archetypes. Those characters tend to be the better ones on the roster. In the Smash Bros series, there's zoners, trappers, brawlers, heavies, glass cannons, and swordies, just to name a few. Throughout all the Smash series, Ganondorf has always been a heavy hitter and has kept the same playstyle for pretty much 20 years, which is fine, but considering Ganon is consistently dead last in viability rankings, it's pretty upsetting. But here's a few ideas that could turn Ganon from a laughingstock of the Smash community to a legitimate threat. Now here's the part I was waiting for. I'm gonna give Ganondorf the respect he deserves and buff him. I think they should make him into a pseudo grapple character with some decent range. His grab range and any lag on his grabs need much improvement. So at first, make his grab a few frames quicker and also give him Link's grab range. His back throw is pretty lackluster and doesn't kill until super high percentages. So I changed his back throw to now kill middleweights at around 120% on FD at the end of the stage. This would help him have some offensive pressure when he's cornered. Giving him a down throw that has less horizontal trajectory would allow Ganondorf to easily combo into a fair or an air for a nice 27%. Ganon's moveset isn't based off the Zelda series at all, but rather a variation of Captain Falcon. So next, I want to change some of Ganon's moves to fit him better as a character overall. The first move I changed in Ganondorf's kit would be his side tilt. His side tilt would now be a forward thrust with the trident from Hyrule Warriors. This would be a good poking tool and would have the ability to be angled so it could two-frame characters that try to snap ledge. His up tilt would also use the trident, and he would thrust it in an upwards motion, mainly being used as an anti-air tool. These both would have pretty good range, giving Ganondorf the option to work in the mid-range. I'll also be getting rid of his neutral special, Warlock Punch, and now replacing it with his signature Levitate ability, seen in pretty much every Zelda game ever. When activated in the air, it will work similar to Peach's float mechanic, but it wouldn't be as good because it would be pretty fucking broken. This would allow him to actually go off stage for edge guards. This would also give him a desperate mix-up option for his recovery. The next move I would want to change is his up special. His up special would have all the same properties, but instead of just doing damage, it would heal Ganon a little. Ganondorf would use the Gloom to suck up HP from the opponent. The quicker they mash out, the less HP Ganondorf restores. It would work kind of like Robin's Nosferatu. The last thing I wanted to change about Ganondorf's moveset is his down B. I feel like his down B is super underwhelming. The only thing it's really used for is to land. When Ganondorf uses it grounded, it can be interrupted by basically anything. So what if instead it reflected projectiles? It would act the same as it usually would, but instead of being interrupted every 5 seconds from a small little arrow, it would now just reflect it. And all these buffs wouldn't necessarily make him broken, but pretty usable. In the end, Ganondorf is one of the worst characters to play competitively in the Smash Bros series, but honestly, one of the funnest to play casually. His hard-hitting attacks and powerful aerials make edge guarding some of the funnest moments in the Smash series. I'm a competitive person and Ganon sucks, but at the end of the day, he's still loads of fun to play, and I hope one day Nintendo gives the Demon King the respect he deserves and makes him competitively viable. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. If you guys enjoyed this video, consider hitting that subscribe button, as I plan on making more Smash Bros content and Nintendo content in general. Until next time, peace.